All right, welcome to the beautiful Pacific Northwest, the land of plaid and coffee and PacWest Bigfoot. This is David. Here's the deal. I know that a lot of us out here are, well, you know how it's going in the world right now. And so, what I'm going to try to do, especially over the next couple months, is to bring you more than just two encounter stories each month. I'm going to go ahead and try to bring you as many as I can for a while. This way, it can help you fill up your day with something fun to do, hopefully, since we're kind of sitting around, something that you can hang out and enjoy with your kids. And so that's what I'm going to try to do. I'm going to try my best here. There's a lot of different reports and stories and encounters and things like that a lot of people send me, these little 2 paragraph or 18 paragraph things that I turn into these awesome campfire like stories for you. And I just want to say I appreciate that from you, and I'll be working on those and a little bit more frequently over the next 2 to 3 months while we sift our way through, I guess you would say, the situation that we're in right now. And my prayers of my family go out to you, that you are doing good, doing well, doing awesome. And if by chance you are infected with the COVID-19, our prayer is that you heal up fast. Okay? So with that, once again, thank you so very much for being here. I'm going to do that, what some people call a clearing of the throat that's annoying, and a nice little sip of what? Yeah, that's right, some Sasquatch coffee from squatchcoffee.com. Hold on. And I love tree knock. All right, let's get into this week's encounter story, and I will do my best to only take a sip of coffee here and there when I absolutely need it. So let's get going. Ocean City RV'ers get a Bigfoot scare. My wife and I are retired. We retired back in 2007. The same year we'd come across the craziest thing in the world, a real-life Bigfoot in Washington, the state of Washington. We were not the only ones to know there was one about the area either. Actually, we were not as surprised to see it as you might think, but we were shocked out of our minds regardless. Here's what we experienced just outside of Ocean City, Washington back in 2007. This RV life. Finally, after spending just over 30 years working for a school district in Arizona, my wife and a longtime teacher, and I, a custodian, had reached retirement. We met at the school in 1986 when I had started a year before her as a custodian at the local high school. Eventually, I worked my way up into a custodian after about 10 years. My wife, however, had a degree in education, and her subject of expertise were math, social studies, and history. After her 5th year there, she became a full-time history teacher. We met the first year, dated for a while, and eventually married. We had 2 children who, yes, attended the high school we worked at. Embarrassing for them, I suppose. Our dream, however, was that in the early years of our retirement to travel a bit around North America, all of it, including Canada. We would go up the western coastline of the U.S. into Canada and back again, always staying in a new place. So finally, we kissed the kids and the grandkids goodbye for about 3 months and took off that mid-spring of 2007. All quiet on the Western Front. Our first stop was a rest stop in Central California, but the real first day was in Calistoga. For us, it was truly the heart of wine country. It was beautiful there, that was for sure. I was a bit more for the redwoods, but my wife wanted to see the vineyards and all the oak-covered hills and valleys they grew in and on. So for 2 whole nights and days, we enjoyed wine tasting at its finest and the people of Calistoga. However, we finally made it to the redwoods, or just on the edge of them up near Crescent City, California, where we stayed for a whole week, and both of us just loved it. So many trees and animals, and of course, that creepy feeling you were being watched at night, too. We did. We felt a little creeped out, Dave. At first, in the evening, they're surrounded by nothing but forest and the tallest trees in the world. It can be a bit intimidating. At first, when you come from a place so open and where light permeates everything. While there, I do recall getting that crazy idea or thought running through my mind of those old Pacific Northwest tales of Bigfoot, the hairy giant living among the ancient trees and mist. And yes, mist, or better yet, fog. It was thick as soup. There, everywhere in the Pacific Northwest we went in the wee hours of the morning. It was there, at least most of the time. It was beautiful, however, just as we knew it would be. And we were enjoying NorCal, the coastal region of Oregon, and Washington for that matter, at least until we hit Ocean City, that is. Welcome to Ocean City. I listened to your Grayland encounter, Dave, and that gave me the guts to email you our encounter, our visual, if you will. Grayland is just down the road, actually. If it were not for the North Bay, you'd make it there in 20 or 30 minutes, tops. I'm guessing of the distance, of course, but that story is what got me to sending you ours. But we were a month into our retirement celebration, if you will, and we made it to our fourth stop along the way, Ocean City. And we chose the furthest RV resort north of this little oceanside town. It had the beach on the one side and trails running up into the low forest-covered hills and mountains on the other. Well, directly across was private property, but just about 50 yards up Highway 101 there was an old road and trails to hike up. The beach was beautiful. The mountains could not have been more lush and green and picturesque. However, what is running around wild in them, is a whole different and really scary thing in and of itself. We got our first taste of the wild and the weird that second night. We had just come back from town that evening for a bite to eat. We took a walk on the beach and came back to our little portable gas fireplace outside the RV to sit around and enjoy the waves crashing off in the distance and the stars above. What we got, however, was about 5 or 10 minutes of howling and even some screaming-like sounds from back up the mountainside on the opposite side of the highway. My wife heard it first. She told me to turn down the CD player even more than the whisper it was. It took about 15-20 seconds, but I heard it too. It was like the howl of a wolf, which would not be unheard of in those parts, of course. But as the howl faded out, you could tell that it was not a canine at all. It was something we'd never heard before. Not from some wildlife show or during all those years listening to Coyote in the Desert. And those things can sound just as creepy and crazy. This sounded almost, well, human-like, we said aloud to each other. It kept howling every so often until it changed up and started to scream. Talking about scaring the crud out of us. It was like a roar that turned into some truly scary shrieking or screaming. Finally, after a few minutes or so, it stopped. We headed inside and I left the window cracked open to listen to the night a while longer until I fell asleep. The shaking tree. It was my wife who said it was Bigfoot first. I simply laughed at the idea or thought. But yes, gentlemen, the wife would be proved right again. But not for a few days from the screaming, that is. Our first visual evidence that we witnessed was pretty strange. We were walking pretty far up the beach, northward. We were about 4 miles up at least, when my wife and I decided to come back along a path through the hillside that skirted the beachhead. We were about a mile into heading back when my wife noticed a tree just up ahead of us shaking wildly. I thought it was the wind, I told her, but suddenly I saw it. And it was not the wind. It was a pretty soft or medium kind of a breeze at the time. It was as if someone or something was just holding on to it and shaking it back and forth like a crazy person. We both stopped in our tracks, looked at each other, and said, "Bear?" As a question instead of a statement. We decided to walk back down to the beach and take it back to the RV resort. Passing directly in front of that tree that was shaking wildly here and there, it suddenly stopped as we did. Talk about weird. And even weirder was the sense we both felt of being watched all of a sudden. Yes, we thought it to be a bear, but no matter what animal it was, we hightailed it back to the RV after that. What in the world? A couple of days later, and without any more weird incidents, we had settled into the beach, the trails, and we'd finally had the nerve to walk along and walking into the quaint little town of Ocean City. It really is a great place to stay, and the people and other travelers like us, and especially the locals were all really nice. We actually got to know our neighbors a couple of sites down one night, and not because we just wanted others to talk to or make friends per se, but because the crazy sounds were again coming from the hills and mountains beyond. It was the howl that would become a scream we could hear, and that included our neighbors. The wife and I decided to step away from the small fire and our chairs and stood in the street, or the driveway, if you will, to listen closer. Of course, we were a bit frightened when suddenly a voice next to us gave us an answer to the question I stated out loud. What in the world is that? It was our neighbors, a young couple from the Bay Area, all younger than us. Her husband said it first. Bigfoot. There's a Sasquatch or a Bigfoot, whatever you want to call it. He had matter-of-factly stated. His wife seemed to have nodded in agreement, staring off into the hills herself. Both of us, however, looked at each other, but thought better of making that face. You know the one I'm talking about, Dave. But we didn't, and just listened to it go off for a few minutes. After that ended, we made friends with them, invited them to our gas fireplace outside the RV, and chatted more about this Bigfoot thing and why they were so sure it was one. And that alone is an interesting story they want to share with you too. They already contacted you, Dave. So instead of spoiling it, I'll just tell you all that the husband had seen one in the redwood forest once when he was a kid, and it was not a real friendly encounter at all. But we made some good friends, even if we thought they were a little off their rocker. The sound, though, it was really creepy, scary actually. Whatever it was had a set of lungs that Pavarotti would be proud of, and trust me, I saw the movie on that guy's life. What a set of pipes. Into the woods. A couple of days went by without any more sounds or incidents, and we got to know our neighbors better. They were really nice, and the husband and I, here's the deal. I won't name him here, but his story and encounter were crazy. Briefly, without spoiling, as I said, he believed this because he swore he saw two of them actually, not just one. But he believed he was chased or simply just harassed by two of them because he said they did not want me in the area. He found out why, too, which was, to be honest, truly unbelievable. But I believed him. He was pretty animate about what he saw and what he experienced. But I'll let you tell his story, Dave. Anyway, we decided to go hiking that last weekend there. By that Monday, we just wanted to leave. Staying just had us on edge, scared, really freaked out, to be honest. Especially my wife. She had a nightmare that same night and tried to tough it out. But I told her we would just leave. And so we did, not 48 hours after our visual and run-in with one of these things, this animal, I guess. Here's what we saw. We hiked. Well, it was more like a long walk than a real hike. That's for sure. The trails were plenty, but most were intertwining in the low-lying hills, many with spill-off and small creeks that led to the ocean. We walked pretty far, too. I can tell you that eventually we hit a waterway, a large creek or part of the bay or whatever, but looking on the old map at the time, there were some spotty clearings here and there, and just south of that was a large creek, I guess you'd call it. Anyway, we walked that early morning, or early afternoon, around 1 p.m., I recall. The woods there, even in some of the low-lying hills, are thick, really, really thick. You could barely see 30 feet into the tree line while on that trail. The sun was out, but it was partly cloudy that day, so that added to what some would call the creepiness of the forest there. However, at that point, creepiness was not what we felt. We loved it. The thick, dark emerald green forest was spectacular to us. beautiful even. We finally reached the creek. The water slightly blue but clear, and I mean crystal clear. You could see right to the bottom of it. We decided to sit for a few and take a break, have a snack, and just enjoy the sound of the rushing water and the view. At first I thought it was a person squatting down behind a large dark rock or small boulder in the creek. As I squatted there by the edge of the rushing water, just up the creek, I noticed movement. Someone squatted with their arms moving around in the water. I motioned to my wife that we were not alone, and she looked too. But her face was a little more, well, I don't know. I can't explain it. She motioned back to me and whispered that that was not a person. She actually started backing up slowly and quietly back into the trees. Me, I stood up and looked at whoever it was, and they stood up as suddenly as I think they, or it, noticed me moving. That was no boulder. It was not a person or a human. The rock ended up being the thighs and legs of this thing, as it stood straight up, at what I could guess was at least 8 to 9 feet tall. It was hunched a bit, and black as night, with hair that actually hung off this thing flowing around as it stood there. We froze. It froze. Then it screamed and started walking quickly towards us. My wife practically screamed as I grabbed her hand and started moving back through the wood to the trail we came in on. We could hear that thing screaming still and now crashing through the trees on our side of the creek. It was chasing us, I thought. We got to the open trail as I looked behind me and saw that thing. That Bigfoot I knew now was real, and it was still behind us and screaming again. It was ugly. Its face I could barely make out at that moment I could barely make it out, but it was hairless and ashen color, I'd say, and it looked like, I don't know, just old and scary and really, really frightening. That was the last look I got of this thing, though. We ran after that, as fast as 2 retired old farts could. The screaming continued for about another 100 or so yards, but instead of cutting over to the other trail, we simply ran westward towards the town and the beach. And after about 10 to 15 minutes or so of running, we made it, pale-faced, sweaty, exhausted, and of course, shaking with fear. We made it to town and found ourselves in the backyard of somebody's home. Off we go. I was done. My wife was done. We were heading to Idaho. We could barely last another day there. We only made it one. To be honest, we were pretty scared. Scared enough to stay in towns for the rest of the trip. But eventually, a few years ago, we took one more trip up this way in the old RV, and all was good. The fear was gone and replaced by curiosity, to be honest. Today, it's not really being afraid of them. It's really more about, I guess, just that, curiosity. It has really been an interest of mine since, the whole Bigfoot thing. Once you actually see one, well, your world seems to open up a bit more to what is really out there, Dave. But that is our encounter story. Thanks, Bill and Susie.